Before we move into the agenda, let me go ahead and introduce myself, and we'll roll through the rest of the NEE team here with you today so they can introduce themselves as well. My name is Tom Hairston. I am now the Managing Director for NEE. I've been with NEE since its inception, really, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Really enjoyed what we're doing, look forward to the years ahead, and always great to be with you all as leaders, get your perspectives, and work with you to help us grow so that ultimately we help provide the best student environments possible within each of your districts, within each of your schools, and meet your needs and wants as much as we can. With me today, we do have a pretty full NEE team. I'll let each of them introduce themselves. And I will start with Mark.
Thanks, Tom. Mark Doss. I'm joining you this morning from down in Ozark, and it's great to see all of you. As I mentioned in my chat message, we've got some folks that have been with us for a year or two. It's great to see all of you and joining us this morning. And go next.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Sherry.
Hi, Sherry Patterson. I am coming to you from my kitchen in St. Joseph, Missouri, where it is going to be a balmy 55 today. Unbelievable. Had to wear a t-shirt to get the Christmas tree yesterday. It's good to see some of your faces that I haven't seen for a while. We missed you, and so happy that you decided to join us today. Know your time is precious.
Thank you, Sherry. And Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Losing. I write the professional development materials for EdHub, and I also provide user support on the emails and on the telephone.
Thank you, Kathy. And Kendra.
Good morning. I'm Kendra Christians. I am here in Columbia at the office, actually. I've got NEE on the wall behind me, and I am the marketing director for NEE.
Thank you, Kendra. And Chuck, round us off.
Hey everybody, my name is Chuck Mays. I work with training and support in the southeast part of Missouri. Sherry, be very jealous. We're going to get to be 60 today here in Sikeston. And so looking forward to a great afternoon here. Looking forward to this webinar too, guys. Good to see all of you today.
All right. And thank you, Chuck. And for those of you that may be interested, Chuck is also the one leading us through the consensus scoring sessions that are going on right now, doing a lot of heavy lifting to help us get prepared for training. As we move into December, we will start focusing on training for this summer. And so as you have ideas, suggestions, feel free to drop us a note. Let us know your wishes, desires, or needs may be for your leaders and administrators for that summer training. Always happy to take on suggestions and look forward to any that you may have. With that, and I see some of you already doing that, but do go ahead and drop in one message via chat, your name, the district you're in, the responsibilities you have in that district or position for that district, just so everybody here today can see who all is in the room. And whenever you want, feel free to ask questions of each other. As always, you can also ask questions directly to us, but feel free to use the Hive Mind, the expertise and experience here as well. Let's go ahead now and talk through the day and how we're going to approach this webinar. So today on the screen, you can see the agenda. We're going to first talk through refreshing feedback paths. For most of you that went through summer training, if you went through summer training, this should be a quick refresher. For some of you, no worries. We will build your capacity and learning around our effective feedback path process as we go through today. But we do want to provide a quick refresher on that feedback path process to start. Then we're going to move into how to have effective feedback conversations with principals. We're going to talk about how to find the right starting place, how to plan for the year, how to use evidence, how to select a focus for each of those conversations, and then how to really sink into those feedback paths, work with those feedback paths to help develop individualized, customized feedback conferences that meet principals at where they are and help them grow to where you want them to be and where they want to be as leaders as well. So let me talk first about the feedback paths, and give me a second and I will share with you the feedback path document, and I'm going to share this via chat. So most of you should be able to find in chat a PDF that I shared called Feedback Paths Handout Principle. You'll also be able to find this document in the data tool. When you sign into the data tool, go to Help and Resources and search for Feedback Paths. There you'll also find that Feedback Paths for School Leaders document there. In a second, but not yet, I'm going to talk through that feedback path document. I'll give you time to open that if you want. But I'll also be sharing that feedback path document, some screenshots of it within this webinar as well. So this is the first page of the feedback path process that we recommend. We spent summer training working on this with school leaders that went through our summer training series. We also have modules on this available in EdHub. And as I mentioned, this is also available within the data tool in the Help and Resources section as well. First, I want to draw your attention to the vertical numbers that you see. 1, determine the focus of the conference, find evidence to support that focus. 2, select the most appropriate feedback path. 3, establish the outcome for the conference. And 4, develop a line of questioning that honors the path and achieves the desired outcome. So that's a 4-step process that we recommend in helping to prepare for feedback conversations, in this case with your school building leaders, and be able to set up a feedback conference that, again, meets them at where they are and helps them get to where you want them to be and where they themselves want to be. I also want to then point out horizontally the 4 different paths available: diagnostic, prescriptive, predictive, and micro. Starting from left to right, diagnostic is a path you would go down if the principal lacks the conceptual knowledge, the foundational knowledge of effective leadership. How do we assess what is effective leadership, what may be ineffective leadership, and what steps can we as a superintendent or as a supervisor of a principal take to help that principal improve their effective leadership skills? Prescriptive means that we understand, we see that the principal, that the building leader has some understanding of the practices, but may not be able to implement them as effectively as their understanding may suggest. Descriptive is when we see that there's some success in implementing the leadership skills, but those could be refined a little bit with just a little more thought, a little more reflection on how can things maybe look different. And then that micro path is going to be really effective leadership skills are present and there's some expertise attached with that. And we want to give that principal, that building level leader, a little more fluidity, a little more of their own individualized thought on what comes next, what can they do to improve their leadership. So that's the first page of the feedback path process. And again, those 4 steps vertically, the 4 paths horizontally. And then on the second part, the second page of that document, if you have it pulled up, you'll see the same thing as on this screen now, are just questions that help prepare the conversation, help the conversation stay on target according to those horizontal paths and what we want to see from the building level leader as we move forward. with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Mark's going to talk through how to find a starting place, how to begin this process and work through this process so that feedback is continuing, comprehensive, and builds throughout a year. Mark, take it away.
Thanks, Tom. We understand, here we are, after Thanksgiving, we're in this period between the holidays, and many of you are literally in the midst of meeting with principals, reviewing sort of their mid-year formative conversation. So this topic today is very timely from that perspective. But we also want to talk about this not only from where you're at today and the work you're going to be doing the next 2 or 3 weeks, but also talk about this as in its entirety around an annual cycle of when should we start and what are sort of the steps through this to look at this as more of an annual process. So we're hoping this can be helpful for you on the short term, as well as something to think about on the longer term of getting a rich dialogue on a continuous basis throughout the school year. So first, we're going to talk about, a starting point. Now, when's that starting point? Typically we would want to, on an annual type basis, we'd want to look at this, sometime in the late spring, right before school's out or shortly after school's out, before the principals leave for the summer. We would start to look at, kind of getting some groundwork laid for the coming school year and starting this. But in doing that, whether you do it in August or in May and June, wherever you choose the starting point, we should first start with, what are the essential responsibilities and practices that they use every day and in most every situation. We'd like to really tie those back to the leaders. Again, it's another if you're not familiar with those, another document there in the help and resources section. Just type in leader standards and that document comes up. And these are built off the PSEL standards. We've adjusted a few of those to meet our particular needs within NEE, but they're pretty much the PSEL standards. So we would like to really start with a founding or grounding this work in standards to really look at the practices and responses that the principals are using. And again, try to start this from that scope of work. And when you move beyond that, is you start to pick out areas of strength or growth. And a lot of that's going to come from your day-to-day work with the principals or being in their buildings, being around their staff. If in the previous year you've used the teacher survey, you might bring that data back out and look at it. And you're starting to pick up the pieces of data to try to determine amongst these standards and indicators, which are some that would lean more towards strengths, and are there one or two that would lean more towards areas of growth. So again, it's just something to do some little preliminary work before you approach them or begin to talk with them, would be to go through that process. And that's even, I think, even important right now, as you're preparing for that formative conversation, is to go through these 2 steps to make sure that you have in your hand the information you need just to have a conversation to help move them forward. Tom, yeah, there we go. And like with the teachers, and most of you have been in NEE long enough, you kind of know how we narrow the focus of the teacher evaluation process down to 3 to 5 indicators. And that's a similar process what we want to do with the principals. We know there are quite a long list of different standards, 10 standards, and I think there's 30 some indicators in that set. So we need to focus that down, and we, just like we did the teachers, we'd like to get that down to 3 to 5. Again, maybe a couple that are strengths where we're really trying to give them a good healthy pat on the back, as well as 1 or 2 that are areas that we want to help them grow with. Now we're going to get into the 4 paths a little bit, and we'll get a little bit more into detail about how to approach those indicators. But certainly from your preparation standpoint, let's try to bring that set down to a manageable number. finding the same type of focus for your administrators. Again, that's just like we're doing with the teachers. We're going to do with the administrators. Is we're going to try to bring that principal along to the standpoint of focusing their work down to a single indicator or two, and bringing that work and focusing that work down so that we have very manageable situation. Particularly right now, there's just with a lot of extra things on our plate. The amount of work we're asking of them for this process, certainly we're going to be very mindful of that and keep that level of extra effort on their part to a minimum, but yet we still want to be able to exercise our ability to help them move forward. And again, some of this may be more critical. In some situations, it may be more critical, and that must be addressed. Where in other cases, again, with some of the paths, it's maybe less critical. So we're trying to keep this as a balancing act between what they can do and what we expect them to do. Now, the fifth area is starting to gather up the evidence, or what evidence do you have available that you can collect and gather in this process. So certainly I mentioned the teacher survey. Again, you may have a set schedule where you go through the buildings from time to time, and we've got some resources that can help you if you're looking for certain types of evidence around certain indicators or certain standards. We've got some resources that we can help you with that, but we certainly want you to be gathering that up as you're going through this to help give them concrete information that they can use to help plan and move forward. So we certainly think these 5 steps are, again, a good process to go through in your preparation for that starting point, or even a formative conversation this time of year. All right, so as far as looking at a whole school year and trying to plan out this process, I mentioned earlier about starting, in the late spring, early summer period, as far as looking at this process and meeting with these principals and covering some of these first 5 steps I gave you a moment ago. But certainly we need to look at, the timing of all of this. And one thing we recommend is, which you're probably in the midst of getting ready for one right now, is having at least 2 formative conversations with the principal before we get to that summative conference, which in Missouri is typically in late January or early February. Most districts so-called rehire principals at the February board meeting. So in kind of backing up from that point, obviously this time of year, late November, early December is probably the time period for that second formative conversation, which means we probably needed to have one maybe back in late September or early October. And again, just trying to look at the timeline and dividing up some across the calendar as well as the school year, and trying to divide that out. So maybe have a sit down conversation with them to launch in the late spring, early summer, a late September first formative conversation, maybe a late November, early December for the second formative conversation, with the summative happening in early February. And again, in item 2 there, along those lines, when are we going to collect this information to have these conferences? Most of that September formative conversation is probably going to be strictly on your observations of when you're in the buildings, or when you're talking to the teachers, talking to the parents. We've had all the startup of school activities going, so you've had a chance to be around the buildings during that time, which you're gathering information and collecting that during that time period. So that would fall into that first one. Probably by this time of year, you're thinking about the teacher survey. You may, in some cases, maybe want to do that before this second formative conversation. So you might launch that teacher survey in early November. So you've got that data available that you can review before the second formative. So again, real flexibility in the evidence pieces there. But when we've got those parts of the principal evaluation, the building improvement plan organizer, we've got the PD plan organizer. So we've got some other pieces of data that you could lay in there as evidence that would be very helpful. All right, and as I mentioned, as you're documenting that evidence, go ahead and open that summative. Go ahead and put those notes in the summative comment box. So you've got that stuff loaded into the summative, ready to do those conversations. I would, as you're doing the formative conversations, I would enter that as an event in the summative comment box that in late September and late November that we met. Here's the date we met on. Here's what we talked about, and enter that into that conversation around that in that summative comment box. Again, as you're closing that document, be sure and hit the white button because we're wanting to save that, but not close that summative process. I'll add that note that we don't want to use that gold button yet. We want to use the white one because it saves it and keeps it open for future use. We also, in number 4, I'd mention, if the circumstances are necessary, we do have the short-term professional growth plan. That's just like with the teacher. If steps are needed on a more quick or rapid change, it's one of those situations where you need something to change immediately. If they're going to be back or you're going to recommend them to the board in February, you've always got that particular plan document that you could pull out and implement again as the bullet says, or to put out a fire if something is very specific that you need to address. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in over in the chat and I'll try to answer those back via chat. But Tom, I'll turn that back over to you.
All right, thank you, Mark, for laying out kind of the process of deciding where do I start on providing effective feedback? How do I figure out what evidence to bring in? How should this look throughout the year? And how do we narrow that focus on what's absolutely the most essential pieces of leadership for a district, for a school, etc. With that overview that Mark provided of the year, I'm now going to focus back in on individualized conversations and being able to deliver on individualized feedback conversations with each administrator, each leader that you may be working with, that you may be providing feedback to. First of all, as you're preparing for this feedback conference, for taking the time to get prepared, be mindful about what you want to address, how you want to address it. Use the evidence. That's the most important piece as we think through how to prepare for an effective feedback conference. What do the measures you utilize tell you? Mark mentioned the measures we have available through our NEE principal evaluation. We have resources on our blog, resources in the data tool to help with those principal evaluation materials, as well as resources in EdHub. We're also just a call or email away if you want some personalized information on how those resources, how those measures may work for you, for your buildings and districts as well. There may also be other evidence that you include that's currently not within our principal evaluation measures, and that's more than okay, but use the evidence available to you to determine where is this administrative leader in terms of their effectiveness, the effectiveness of their leadership skills on the areas that we're wanting that focus to be on. And then really take the time to prepare. Before you go into a feedback conference, have the mindfulness, the thoughtfulness to sit down, think through for each of the individualized leaders in your building and your district, to think through, how does this conference need to look? What questions do I need to ask of this particular individual, this particular leader, to help them with their growth and make sure that they continue to grow as a leader. That takes us back to that transition to effective feedback path planning. Up on the screen for you is that feedback path process. Again, I mentioned this earlier for those of you that downloaded that feedback path process document earlier. You should be able to look at it again as we're working through this and working through our next steps. But number one, determine the focus of the conference. What leadership skill, what leadership indicator or standard do you want that conference to be focused on? We collect a lot of evidence. We have a lot of material, a lot of different routes we could go. And if we go down all of those routes, we're making that conference overburdened, making next steps really hard to determine where do I go. And so by narrowing in that focus based on what the evidence is telling us, where we want to see improvement, growth, or strengthening, that's going to be the focus of the conference. At that same time, once you've determined that focus of the conference, be prepared to share the evidence that supports the focus of the conference, why you selected this area, what defines it as being the most important way for that leader to grow, to strengthen their own leadership practice. As you look at that, you should be able to move horizontally across that feedback path process document to determine what is the most appropriate feedback path. Sherry's going to be working with you more on that here in a couple of minutes to determine what's the most appropriate feedback path. How do I know if in a certain case a leader may need to go down the diagnostic path, or we may need to work down the descriptive path together, or either of the other two paths as well. Once you determine that, establish the outcome for the conference. It's not good enough to just say, oh, we're going to talk this through. We need to have an outcome for that feedback conference. What do we want to happen as a result of the conference? What are the next steps? What are the goals, the objectives, the changes we want to see? And how do we work through making sure that is happening? Once we have that outcome in place, we could develop a line of questioning that honors the leader, that honors the path, and achieves the desired outcome, lays that foundation for where we want to go next, what leadership skills we want to work on together, and how we are going to improve. Again, as you have questions anytime about that feedback path or anything else, do be in contact with us. We are always more than happy to talk through it or help in any way we can. Next up, Sherry is going to lead you through some scenarios with that feedback path process, help you work through it from the evidence collected on possible principal evaluations and how to set up a feedback conference that honors the leadership and improves it, strengthens it in its own individualized way. So Sherry, take us away.
Okay, so everybody, fair warning, we're going to play a little game of Let's Pretend. And in this game of Let's Pretend, I might actually call on some of you or ask you to put something in chat. So here we go. We are going to pretend that you are the supervisor of a principal. And last year, you just started having some questions about leadership standard and indicator 2.1, which is your principal's ability to promote effective instruction. So as the fall began, you started to narrow the focus to 2.1 and started to look for some evidence as to how this principal really was performing with that standard. So I'm going to give you a pretend scenario that perhaps this is some of the evidence that you collected. And when you look at this, I want you to make sure that you look at the formal knee measures and the informal things. So Tom, you want to put up the first scenario? All right. So again, let's say that with that idea in mind that you have some doubts about the effective instructional leadership of this principal, you went and observed a PLC team meeting, and the principal did participate, but it was very limited. Really only had one kind of example of input that was instructional in nature. You also watched a post-observation feedback, the comments, that you put in the data tool, and you went through and reviewed those, and you realized that this principal offers the same gosh darn 2 instructional alternatives to every teacher, regardless of what the issue was. They've got 2 go-to instructional comments that they always leave. While you're at your own principal meeting, you're the leader at the meeting, and your principals are there. This particular principal engages in instructional conversation with his or her peers at a really superficial level, can use some buzzwords but really can't defend their comments, doesn't go very deep. This particular principal's building professional development plan, the one they created with their building, indicates that outside consultants will be used to deliver all formal PD. In other words, this principal isn't standing up in front of his or her teachers at all. And then when discussing the performance of his or her teachers, the principal can identify 3 struggling teachers, and he or she can even tell you what the weakness is for these teachers, but they can't really articulate to you what they're going to do to help them to improve. So with all of this information, all of this evidence, what path are you going to use to meet the needs of this principal? So everybody think about it a little bit, and in chat, what path are you going to use to meet the needs of this principal? And if you're brave enough, tell me why. And in case I forgot to mention, I'm really good at wait time. So I will wait while you guys think. Does this principal have any concept of instructional leadership? Is there any evidence to show you that there's any concept? Thank you, Caleb, and thank you, Stacy. Okay. Okay, looks like several people are agreeing that it would be diagnostic. So when we put this scenario together, we said prescriptive. Why do you think we said prescriptive, and why did you say diagnostic? Because there's no right or wrong answer. It mainly is about how you're going to meet the needs of the principal. So if you think it's diagnostic, let's talk about why. So Stacy, can you pop on? Why diagnostic and not prescriptive?
I think you could argue for prescriptive if you were being optimistic.
There you go.
I was reading it as they're using buzzwords that they've heard before without really understanding what they mean.
Yeah, yeah. So you feel like if there is some concept of instructional leadership, it's pretty limited.
Yep.
Yeah. I could absolutely go that way with you also. So Caleb, how would you, if you believe that this is diagnostic, and you do, you said so, what do you mean by needs to gain a better understanding? A better understanding of what, Caleb?
Yeah, so I was thinking of the kind of superficial buzzwords that were alluded to, but no depth. So to be diagnostic and supporting them specific to that and giving them some understanding of going deeper and providing better supports.
You believe that the foundation really isn't really there, and that you could build on that foundation a little more before you led them to some action.
Yeah, I think so. And like I believe it was Stacy said, I think that you could approach this in a prescriptive way too. I definitely think there's an argument for that. It'd maybe be a more positive approach, but it seemed like from the description to me, the foundation was lacking.
And the problem, if the foundation is lacking and you go prescriptive, because in prescriptive, you would be giving them strategies to use, right? Probably some effective instructional strategies. And they're not ready for that with the foundation, then the prescriptive doesn't go very well. It falls, what was that old Sunday school song? You can't build your house upon the sand.
Yeah, right.
It's just gonna fall apart. So yeah, I could argue, I'm with you, Caleb, I could argue this either way, you and Stacy, both what you and Stacy said. Okay, let's try another one. So in this one, you've reviewed the building improvement plan and it has a strong instructional focus and it's in math. But you know, because you're the supervisor and you look at all those scores, the reading scores are in the tank for a second year. You also observe this principal leading professional development for the entire faculty with regards to the new math program. But there really wasn't any differentiation of PD for those early adopters of the math program and those that are just beginning to adopt to the new program. You've also looked at mid-year formative assessment, and the reading scores are actually showing great improvement. And the building hallways are filled with artwork. It looks beautiful, but there's really no display of actual, hardcore content work. So what are you going to do with this principle? If you could put that in chat, I would appreciate it. What path is going to meet the needs of this principle? Does this principle not have conceptual knowledge? Does this principle just need instructional strategies in their tool belt? Does this principle need to reflect? Or is this principle just great and you just ought to let it go? Be brave. See, Caleb and Stacy are going, I'm not answering because she's going to make me talk. Well, Dr. Vogelaar, I think that you are with everybody else. Good to see and hear from you again. Why did you pick descriptive?
Well, I saw certainly knowledge from the principal and success in implementing things, but with reflection can pick up on like the need to, not take a one-size-fits-all approach to PD with staff, but recognizing that the teachers might be on a different floor. You're seeing the success with the reading scores, some improvement, but it was in the tank for the second year in a row. So those things told me that there was certainly strength in this leader, academically, instructionally, but maybe needs more prompting to be reflective on the approach.
Yeah, you get the sense that this leader, if they would just take a time to look at the bigger picture, might be able to come up and make changes in their own leadership. I agree. Mr. Hatley says, descriptive, would redirection correct the situation? I don't know. What do you think there, Mr. Hatley? Is it a guarantee?
Not necessarily, but man, just look at the situation. Obviously, looking at math the way he is and just ignoring another area. Did he just miss something? I mean, yeah. We're all human. You got to see, was that just an error on his part? And we need to redirect there.
Did he just see the shiny new math toy and go that
exactly
and ignore the reading?
That's right.
Okay. And so in your conference, would you represent the reading data to him and ask him or her to talk about that and what was going on there?
Absolutely. That'd be a starting point.
Yeah, I think so too. And I agree with Bob that it seems like this person has enough on the ball that perhaps with the right questioning, they could get themselves to go, oh, I better be mindful of the reading scores and maybe let this math be it for another year. So, okay, let's try another scenario. Thank you guys for your responses. Okay, so in this case, you are doing your observations. There's little use of language related to the principles of effective instruction when you and the principal are walking through the building. And the principal seldomly engages teachers in open conversations. Anytime that you're around, you don't hear that. And you definitely saw that on the teacher survey results. A review of the post-observation evaluation comments reveals that the feedback for teachers is not focused on instruction. It's probably got things on there like pretty bulletin boards and kids love you and parents love you, that kind of thing. A review of the classroom distribution report. Remember that report that shows what kinds of scores that the principal's giving? That this principal has not given a score below a 5 for anybody in any indicator impacting instruction. And the principal is unable to articulate the focus of the building's professional development plan and can't describe what will be happening during next week's early out days. So there are a lot of evidence that you've collected, some using formal knee and some using just observations with your work with the principal. So Dr. Vogler says definitely fits diagnostic. What do the rest of you think? Jasmine says diagnostic. Jasmine, if you had to guess what kind of a principal this was, what would you say? Is this an instructional leader or a building manager?
A building manager, or at least I hope that part is established.
You hope the building's very clean and orderly?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So where would you begin with a principal like this?
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking. There's a lot to cover here. So one, you have the whole observation and feedback piece of their supervision of teachers. So you have that box. Then you have the box about their professional development plan. How does that relate to their school improvement plan? So you have that piece over there. And then just their knowledge in instruction as well. So their professional development. So
the rest of those aren't going to probably get any better until you build some knowledge and concepts. Stacy, where would you begin with this principle? How would you build those concepts?
I think I would just do a lot of one-on-one coaching and modeling.
Yeah. Lots of walkthroughs.
Yeah, I think lots of walkthroughs, and I think I would imagine you have your own resources in your district of other principals that could be very good mentors for this person.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure this principal, from what we see in this evidence, could walk into a classroom and go, oh, that's great instruction, and that's not good instruction. So lots of practice with that, I would think too. Okay, hey, thanks. Let's go. Last scenario. See what you think about this one. Okay, the principal informs you that they are modifying the building PD plan mid-year because teachers need additional support. And the needs status report indicates 6 observations and powerful feedback completed for both of your new teachers or their new teachers in the building by December break. A video post-observation conference shows the principal skillfully leading the teacher to self-discover why her lesson did not produce the results she wanted. The principal has 2 effective professional growth plans in play, and both document instructional changes happening, so they must have been good. Observation of a teacher's meeting witnessed the principal asking 2 teachers to present student growth data from an instructional strategy the entire school is implementing. And the principal has observed team teaching a lesson from the new math program with a 5th grade teacher and in the instructional coach. So obviously this one is what? Does somebody tell me? This is absolutely micro. So what I would really like to more focus on this one is look at all the different ways in this scenario and any of the others that you can collect evidence. So Absolutely Me has several formal documents that you can review: the survey, the building improvement plan, the personnel growth plan, and whatever else. Help me, team members, that I'm forgetting. But there are a lot of other ways for you to collect evidence once you have focused in on what standard you have a concern about or that you want to reinforce. So besides the paths themselves, choosing the right one to meet the need of the principal, I want you to make sure that you are realizing you've got to narrow this focus and get this down to 1 or 2 standards and indicators that you want to work with and have those conferences about. Or just like we tell principals working with teachers, it's not going to do you any good. Principals can only focus on 1 or 2 things to change in their behavior, just like teachers. So make sure you get that that focus narrowed, and then you pick your right path. So thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Tom now, so we can finish up here and get you back to work.
All right. Thank you, Sherry, for leading us through those scenarios. As you can see, that's how feedback paths come to be, just from looking at the evidence available to us, what we're understanding. Again, as you have questions, anytime you may need a listening ear or just some extra guidance or anything like that, please be in touch with us. We say this to your principals, and we're saying it to you all as well. We are more than happy to be listening ears to help guide some reflection, some of your own thought on how should this effective feedback conference possibly look. And we're more than happy to do that. Just get in touch with us, either emailing us, emailing the general nee@missouri.edu account, or calling any of us as well. With that, that's going to end our webinar today. We will go ahead and keep this meeting open until the last person leaves. And so as you have questions, if there's anything you want to learn more about, if there's any scenario you want to talk through, feel free to do that, and we will stay online, talk with you through that. Also, stay in touch with us. You could contact us via the help desk. You see the number there, as well as that email address, nee@missouri.edu. On our blog, we do have blogs focused on principal evaluation, as well as blogs focused on the data tool, both of which may be helpful to you throughout this process. There's also some blogs that Chuck and Sherry have been writing on the feedback path process throughout this year as well, so do check those out. We will keep you up to date with announcements we put into the data tool, emails we send, and of course you can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, or on Pinterest. Always happy to share the latest news, updates, and anything else that may be of benefit to each of you. So thank you again for joining us on this beautiful Tuesday morning. Hope you have a great rest of the day, a great rest of the week. And do be in touch anytime we can be of help, no matter how big or small that ask is. We are ready to be here, support you in any and every way we can. So with that, have a great day. If you need to stick around, ask questions, or chat a little bit more about anything, feel free to do that. Thank you all very much.
Bye, Jazz.